It had been 2 years, and I could recall every moment, almost in great detail. It was towards the end of school, and everyone was streaming into their last period. Mine was history, a class that not only did I do poorly in, but I also utterly detested, especially the teacher. As I walked down the crowded hallway, hearing for what felt like the millionth time that hour that Mr. Thompson was going to drone on through hour one more over the Civil War made my stomach churn. And so, instead of going to class, I made the decision I thought would save me from a boring lecture. I snuck into the back bathroom with a plan to hide out until the bell rang. For what may be the last time in my life, I selected the farthest stall to be my haven from the chaos of school life. Resting my back on the cool metal wall, I pulled out my phone and hoped it could provide me with enough games or two that might dull my senses as I waited for whatever was to come. The voice of the principal came suddenly through the intercom, like a knife slicing the stillness of that bathroom. "Lockdown! Lockdown! This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room, lock the door, and turn off all lights." At first, I think I did not hear the urgency in his voice. I thought it was just another drill. With a dismissive shrug, I kept sitting there, my thumbs furiously tapping on the screen. But just seconds later, the entire building went dark. The bathroom plunged into complete blackness as well. The familiar buzz of the AC unit was silenced, and an unsettling gray shroud fell over me like a blanket. Panicky, my heart started racing. Power had never before been cut as during a drill. I quickly sent a text to my friend, hoping to glean some kind of idea what's going on. "Hey, what's going on?" I typed, my fingers slightly shaking. Almost immediately he replied, "Dude, where are you?" "It's lockdown here." Confusion covered me as I read the message from him. "Everyone's looking for you," he said. Panic was flickering in my chest when he asked where I was. I told him that I went to the bathroom and hid. Feeling confined, I adjusted my brightness on my phone and typed a reply. "Why is it a lockdown?" Then he finally answered, "This young fellow wielding a knife starts banging on classroom doors, asking them to open up." A cold sweat crept down my spine. My classroom and the lavatory where I was were on the same floor. This exposed me to grave danger. I turned my cell phone off and listened intently, every little sound echoing ominously in the silence. Footsteps were walking down the hall. My heart beat in my chest as I listened to the bathroom door open. I held my breath, of course, fear pumping through my veins. The door swung open, and someone stepped inside and went over to the stall next to mine. My heart was racing because of all the horror movies I had watched. The characters were stuck in scenarios like these. Taking a deep breath, I finally found myself able to break the silence. "Who's in here?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. This continued with stilled silence before a shaky voice replied, "I just need to find a hiding spot." I heard of the lockdown. He sounded about my age, so I decided to trust him at least for the moment. We sat there in awkward silence as our hearts thudded in unison and could feel the fear between us. Just then, the intercom crackled with another order. "All students, please leave school in an orderly manner through the front doors, where police are waiting to take charge." Once again, my heart pounded more furiously, but this time it was tempered with a flicker of hope. I threw open my stall door. Peering to my right, I spotted him, frozen in position. "Aren't you leaving?" I asked incredulously. He said, Yeah, man, just give me a couple of minutes." I didn't put much consideration on it. At that moment, I was more focused on getting away from there. I came out of the bathroom and walked towards the front door, finally realizing with anxiety and urgency what was happening. The further I walked, the ringing started on my phone again. My friend's messages took over my screen, explaining to me the chaos happening outside. A kid a couple of years older than us tried to rob a gas station at knife point a few blocks away. He stabbed a couple of people, and when he failed, he ran into our school. I couldn't help but shiver at the last sentence. My friend continued, "That's why the police existing in the building are looking for the boy who is still hidden somewhere inside." Panic rose in me, and I started running towards the front doors. Once outside, the chaos of the moment hit me. There were policemen directing students to safety. Their faces were tense with urgency, and I rushed over breathlessly to one of them, telling him what had happened in the bathroom. They stiffened at once, their faces taking on the grim lines of intent. The officer barked something, and a detail started running to check the bathroom. I watched them race toward the building. Then they came back, not more than 5 minutes later, with their faces set. "There is nobody there," one of the officers said. But the window inside the bathroom was broken. The kid must have escaped. A shiver down my spine was well colded in the realization that I had just been mere feet from a dangerous criminal. Yet, no words could depict this as vividly as when I felt both grateful and horrifying because of this realization. School returned to routine after that incident, but for the rest of my life, I would remember that day, the fear, darkness, and the mysterious boy in the stall next to me. That was the day which changed everything in my mind when it came to safety, and I knew that I would carry that moment with me for the rest of my life. Ryan was the kind of guy you didn't notice. It was unfortunate because he was exceptionally intelligent. He blended into the background, whether at school or at home. Our classmates hardly knew he was there, and his parents weren't much better, treating him like he didn't exist. But I knew Ryan. I was his only friend, the only one who recognized the depth of his pain and his sharp intellect. That night of the senior dance, everything changed. Ryan finally gathered the courage to ask Lily to be his date. She was attractive, and the two had attended the same classes for years. He had a significant crush on her, so it was a bold move for him, but he desperately wanted to escape his loneliness. When he asked her, she laughed at him. The rejection was public, harsh, and devastating. I tried to comfort him, but Ryan had already started to retreat into a dark place. He was caught staring at her multiple times by teachers. One day in class, he began muttering to himself, only realizing it when other students pointed it out. His mother complained that he would talk to a childhood toy for hours, while his father was usually out hunting with his friends and didn't care. I should have seen the signs. I should have done something, but I didn't. On the night of the dance, Ryan wasn't there when I arrived. I assumed he was too embarrassed to show up after what happened with Lily. The gym was decorated with streamers and balloons, the usual cheap decorations for a high school dance. Kids were dancing and laughing, and I tried to impress my date, Mia, with my humor, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. About an hour into the dance, the lockdown alarm blared.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building, lock the door, and turn off all lights.
And the lights flickered, plunging us into semi-darkness. Panic spread through the crowd, and cries of confusion grew louder. I had a sinking feeling in my gut. Ryan. The gym doors burst open, and there he stood, a twisted figure in the doorway wearing a mask. He held two of his father's hunting rifles. He walked in with deliberate calmness, as if he had a purpose. "They will see me now," he declared. Screams erupted as he fired the first shot, hitting a student named Mark square in the chest. Blood sprayed across the dance floor, and chaos ensued. The crowd scrambled, ducking under tables and pushing each other in a desperate attempt to escape. But there was no way out. Ryan had locked the doors. I froze, watching as my friend transformed into a monster. He moved methodically, shooting without discrimination. I saw him shoot Sarah, the girl who had ridiculed him the previous year. Her lifeless body crumpled to the floor. He turned and fired at Mr. Johnson, our math teacher, who tried to shield a group of students. The bullet tore through Mr. Johnson's shoulder, and he went down with a scream. "Ryan, stop. This isn't you." My voice was lost in the chaos. Ryan didn't hear me, or maybe he didn't care. He continued talking to the voices only he could hear, justifying his actions and condemning those who had wronged him. I saw Lily huddled under a table, crying, and I knew he wouldn't stop until he found her. I pushed through the panicked crowd, trying to reach him. The closer I got, the clearer I could see the madness in his eyes. He wasn't the Ryan I knew. This was someone else entirely. Whatever demons he had inside him had taken control. I just wished someone had called for help. "Ryan, it's me, Jeremy. You don't have to do this. Let them go." He turned to me for a moment, and I saw recognition in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold rage. He raised his gun, and I felt a sharp pain in my side as the bullet tore through me. I fell to the ground, clutching my wound, the world spinning around me. "You'll all remember me now," he shouted as he continued his rampage. The gym was filled with screams and gunfire, and bodies lay scattered, blood pooling on the floor. The horror seemed endless, but eventually the police stormed in, ending the nightmare. They brought him down in a single shot. As I lay there bleeding and helpless, watching as they dragged Ryan's body away, it was just an ordinary school day, that kind which is forgotten as soon as the bell rings. The history class seated me in front of familiar classmates. Mr. Watterson was talking about the ancient civilizations. His voice was a low hum in the background while I doodled in my notebook. Time crawled, and my mind wandered back and forth between daydreams of summer vacation and rumination on what I'd have for lunch. Just as suddenly, a soft knock penetrated my reverie. A student from the office entered with a note in her hand. She approached Mr. Watterson, who broke himself from his lecture to read the note. Having perused it for a moment, he looked up and called my name. Having been challenged by my friends, what could this be about? I hadn't been told of any appointments, and my heart began pounding a little at the unexpected attention. I stood up, feeling equal parts fear and fascination, and walked to the front of the class. "See you later, pal," Mr. Watterson said, handing me an assignment along with the note, which now served as my hall pass. The note read, "I will be here to pick you up for your appointment at 10:30. Mom." A slight unease crept in. I looked at the watch. It was still 10:28. Why didn't my mother tell me about any appointment? I pushed the feeling aside, convincing myself that probably it was just a routine checkup or something minor. As I headed down the dusky hallways, the fluorescent lights overhead blinked and buzzed, casting suspicious shadows against the wall. To my left was the side door. It was where the parents generally awaited their children's dismissal from school. Outside, a minivan idled. It was one of those boring colors that I could not even identify. I slowed as I scanned the parking lot for the telltale curves of my mom's van. Nothing. Just then, the front passenger window rolled down. A woman looked out at me with her eyes fastened to mine. "I'm here to pick you up," she said with a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your mom asked me to." My stomach began to knot. I had never seen this woman in my life. "How do you know my mom?" I asked, my voice laced with skepticism. "Oh, just old friends," she replied nonchalantly, but something about her tone sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I insisted, "I don't feel like going with you. I'll wait for Mom." I began to take a step back, my instincts screaming at me to get away. A smile from her stifled my heart, and I could feel its pounding. I opened the door to go back inside, but tried the side doors only to find them locked. Panic ran amok with me as I pushed at the doors for what felt like an eternity. I had forgotten that all exits were locked during school hours. Just then, I saw the minivan once again. The sliding door opened and closed, and a man stepped out. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and, what could be a distance from me, his expression impossible to read as he began walking toward me. I felt trapped and knew I had to run. I turned around the side of the school and ran full speed toward the front entrance, pounding in my chest. I stepped through the front doors and ran in, almost knocking the lady sitting behind the security desk into her chair. She looked at me, surprised. "ID, please," she said stiffly, a lack of emotion with her words. As I tried to explain this bizarre scenario of searching for my student ID, words jumbled into the mouth and tumbled out. "There is a woman and man outside. They were trying to pick me up, but I don't know them." The face of the security guard changed to one of concern. She showed my identification, her face furrowed in a frown. "Just a minute," she said, reaching for the telephone. I waited for what seemed like the better part of eternity while this weight bore down on me. After what seemed like forever, she wrote me a pass to go back to class. I walked through the now eerily silent hallways, my feet heavy and dreading each step. As I walked into history class again, everyone turned to look at me. Mr. Watterson paused mid-sentence, furrowing his brow in confusion. "Back so soon?" he asked, his voice tinged with surprise. "Yeah, there was a mix-up," I said, attempting to keep my words as nonchalant as the rush of adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Heart racing, I slumped into my seat. It wasn't too long before the bell rang, signaling that it was time for English. Miss Gallo was kind, but so very annoying at times. About 20 minutes into class, she received a phone call. Her demeanor darkened, and she whispered, "We are going to go into lockdown. This is not a drill." The first emotion that struck me was fear. We had the lockdown drill before, but it was different this time. Because we were standing near to the wall to hide outside the view of the door, the room remained silent. I could hear my classmates whispering nervously all around. It felt tense. After a while, Miss Gallo took another call. She returned with a sigh of relief and told us that the lockdown had been lifted. We collectively relaxed and returned to our lesson. It wasn't until finally the school day ended that I learned what the lockdown was for. Someone had entered the school, going through the security window and ignoring the pleas of the guard to stop. He had begun down the hallways, apparently why there was a lockdown. It turned out he was the same man who tried to pick me up outside. The realization hit me like a cold wave. Those strangers in the minivan had concocted an elaborate scheme to lure me away, and I had narrowly escaped. Who were they? How did they know me? My mind raced with questions, each more unsettling than the last.